Good morning and
Good
welcome.
morning.
Good morning. Good morning to all our viewers. It's Candid Conversations with me, Linda Burhans, and today with my friend Pat Vaillancourt. Pat and I have been friends for quite a while, do a bunch of different things, but today we're going to talk about something that's really close to Pat's heart, and it's prisoners of war, POWs from World War II. So I am aware that you are the daughter of a Japanese POW who served 3.5 years in a camp doing hard labor.
That's correct.
How did your dad's experience shape your life?
Well, it shaped it amazing. And for all the suffering that he went through, 3.5 years under Japanese brutality and torture. And as many folks know, only 40% of those prisoners came home. The brutality and being in the tropics and the level of work. But he shaped my life. I am the woman I am today because of Joe Vaillancourt. And in three ways. Number one, he taught me resilience. And that, you can't put a price on that.
No.
He taught me what it is to be resilient. But in the process, ever since I was a little girl, I used to hear them have the night trauma. They have night dreams. Any POW does. And I would come downstairs from the Cape Cod home I lived in and sit with him for a few minutes on his lap, and he'd explain something to me, which is unusual. A lot of them don't like to talk. So it was ingrained in an early age. So the second thing he taught, I was like an angel that I don't know, my mother was sleeping. He probably didn't want to bother her. And he'd say, "This is what's happening to me, Pat, but this is what I'm doing." And the second thing he taught me, of course, was coping skills. As I got older, I put all these pieces of the puzzles together and realizing these are tremendous coping skills. And he also gave me the fire to meet other POWs. There are none alive now from the Bataan Death March of the Philippines. But I interviewed over 50 while they were alive. Hanscom Air Base in Bedford, Massachusetts used to honor them. And I would go there. And the third thing, and we'll talk about it today, he taught me forgiveness. He forgave the Japanese. He owned a Toyota Camry. Oh my God.
Oh my goodness.
He was quite the man, and he lived to 79, which for a POW,
Yeah.
that's, they say
Life.
10 years. You know, he was really 89, but the years of the torture and the starvation definitely had taken its toll.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about some of these other POWs that you have spoken.
Oh my God. I've gone to reunions because there are none alive now, but back I went to one in Pittsburgh and I met a fascinating guy. He comes to the reunion in Pittsburgh and he had driven from Seattle, Washington. And at this time he's 85 years old. So he's driven across the United States. And the question that I ask all of them is, how did you survive? How did you survive? There's the key thing. How do you handle failure? How do you handle torture? How do you handle, years of captivity? Well, this young man, he was 15 when he left home because it was the Depression. There was no food, nothing. He decided to hop the hobo trains at 15 years old. And he said it was like going to the Harvard School of Street Smarts.
Yeah.
He said, here I am with these hobos. They taught me how to evaluate things, how to be safe when you jumped off in a town, how not to get arrested. And believe it or not, that's the key thing as a prisoner of war. You have to know your captives. You have to know your environment, what's around you. And of course, if the railroads were after these hobos, they didn't want them. And when they landed in towns, they were vagrants. And he said, 2 years of that, I went from 15 to a full-grown man at 17. So he said, and here's where the mind comes in. He said, when they captured us, or we surrendered actually, on May 6, 1942, he said, I knew right then and there, I said, these Japanese are not going to kill me because I made it for 2 years on the rail. So there's the first coping skill. Your mind has to believe I can do it. I
Yeah.
have the ability, I have the skills. You've got to make that connection. Then I met another guy who was amazing. He was actually the president of the Association of the Survivors of Bataan and Corregidor. His name was Hank Waledo. And he told me a story that if you don't think they prayed and there was angels and people around them, very many of them told me they heard aunts, uncles, parents, brothers talking to them in the prayers, which I'm sure there was that
Yeah.
kind of connection. And they prayed a lot. So Hank's doing the march, and it's tropical heat in the Philippines. The Japanese did not give them water. 13,000 died from lack of water. They either collapsed, or if they were swerving, the Japanese bayoneted them. They never fired one bullet. So Hank was a very strong Christian man, and he saw this gentleman in front of him swerving from the heat, knowing he's going to go down. And he said, God, let me help him. They all prayed. He grabs this guy, and the guy says to him, Hank, is that your name? He goes, yeah. He said, we're less than a half a mile from the town. Now listen who he pulled up a hoodlum. He said, I'm attached to the black market with the Filipinos. I have $500 cash on me, which in today's world is about
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
$8,000. He said, when you're a prisoner, money buys everything. Now wait till this story. He hands the Japanese guard that's walking alongside a big wad of money. They got paid a penny a day. And he says to the Japanese guard, he knew Japanese, he knew Tagalog, which is the Filipino language. He said, at the town, turn your back. Turn your back. So they go to the town. I guess money talks.
I guess.
They go to the town. He gives some more money to a Filipino, and the Filipino provides bread and water for the 4 or 5 men around Hank. This is an amazing story. And then he says to Hank, goodbye. Hank said, where are you going? He said, the guerrillas are going to take me into the hills. And Hank never saw him again. They had enough water and bread, which they hid. They had to hide things in the groin area because the Japanese were ritualistic, and they made it. So there's the story. Say a prayer and a miracle came. Out came the head of the black market that knew everybody in town and the guerrillas.
And these men were so young at the time. They're like babies. They hadn't really even lived life, never mind, those lessons that they learned.
You know what was so sad? Many of them, you're absolutely right. They were 16, 17, and 18. Some of them lied about their age.
Yeah.
They could get false. I met a lady.
That was very common. My dad lied about his age.
Right, because they wanted 3 meals a day.
Well, they just wanted to, like my dad wanted to just get off the farm.
Right. And their parents couldn't feed them. So they figured, and you got to realize most of these men, and there was a large group from Massachusetts and southern New Hampshire, because Fort Devens in Air Mass was the coastal artillery. And of course, who did they put in an island in the Corregidor and the Bataan area, but a coastal artillery? But they were, at the time they signed up, it looked beautiful, tropical, romance, woman, pineapples, bananas, and 6 months later, it was pure hell. But it taught me the power of prayer, the power of a miracle. Whoever thought that man had $500 on him?
Yeah.
And somehow he escaped. I mean, they were searched when they were captured, but somehow he was able to hide that.
Yeah, sometimes you hear some of the stories of how they hid different things or what they did, and you're just like, how is that possible?
Well, I guess between the hobo camps, they were street savvy kids. They weren't sitting playing video games.
Yeah,
they were out hustling since they were 12. Linda, I got to tell this one story. I met a guy that won the bronze medal in D-Day. Linda will love this because she's a New Yorker. He was 17 years old, landing on D-Day. And he showed me his little vial. I met him in Trinity, Florida, his little vial of sand. And I said, oh my God, how did you do it? He said, when I stood up in the landing craft, the guy to the right got killed, the guy to the left, And the guy in front of me drowned. And he said, the whole way, Linda's going to love this. He said, I'm Vinny the Guinea from Brooklyn and nobody's going to get me.
Oh my
He
goodness.
he said, if you could survive Brooklyn in the Depression. And he said, for the next 3 days, that was my mantra. And he saved guys. He pulled guys to medics. Oh my God. He just kept saying, I'm Vinny the Guinea from Brooklyn. If you could survive Brooklyn, you can survive anything. So they had this tremendous coping skills that there was
and
a
they
way.
had camaraderie together.
Right.
They had that camaraderie together. They were in this together.
Right.
And I think that's what really pulled a lot of those guys, because if they had been like really segregated, even though they were being tortured and horrible things were happening to them, they still were together.
Yes. My father stood with a group of 4 or 5 men that he could trust. And there's a good story to that. One of the men, Russ from Tacoma, Washington, he went blind from lack of vitamin A. Many of them went blind. It's called night blindness. But he was a hustler. I guess you need a hustler. And he was a wheeler dealer. And he spoke, they all learned Japanese very quickly, as best they can, a conversational level. And he could barter cigarettes. He could barter some medicine. The Filipinos that came to the camp, there were Filipinos that came in and out to assist the Japanese. They could hide stuff and do that. So he was always there bargaining for them. And that kept him alive. And the other thing, when these guys came back, like bargaining with a piece of fruit, or half a piece of fruit, or a cigarette, you could get stuff, Yeah. They also knew, this was very interesting, Linda, how they observed. Some guards, of course, were absolutely brutal. There were psychopaths that they pulled out of the regular army. However, there were a portion that had been educated in California and had been brought back at the start of the war by the emperor. So they were more Americanized. They were not true Bushido samurais, and they also understood English. And the guards immediately the prisoners immediately found out who they were, so that they could interact with them. And they were more, were more mellow. They were more pliant. They could turn their back once in a while, or they'd say, hey, like 5 o'clock, they had some ritual with the sake and that. And they knew that, and the men could go steal supplies.
Wow.
I guess stealing but Brooklyn must have been wild in the 30s.
Yeah, it must have been.
She said, I'm Vinny the Guinea from Brooklyn, and I made it.
That's hysterical. That's hysterical. So have any of them ever spoken to you about what it was like when they came back home?
Oh, yeah. It was hard. I've met a lot of wives at the reunion. They actually bring the wives up to talk on panels, which is wonderful.
Yeah.
And those that had been married before, had been married. My father didn't get married to 47. He met my mother at 47 in a U.S. audience. But they said a different man came home. That was hard. Some of the wives said they didn't know how to deal with the night terrors. We didn't understand post-traumatic syndrome at that time. However, the VA, a lot of breakthroughs were made. So in Lowell, Massachusetts, there was a VA, and they formed a group where they brought these men. And the men could talk about it. And they'd say, well, my wife's got to understand I have these traumas. One wife, her husband was a Marine, and she said he'd wake up after a bad dream. He'd be hitting her or punching her.
Yeah.
And they had to learn to get out of the bed, let him have the dream. The other very interesting thing, Linda, they didn't know what happened for 3.5 years. Right?
At home.
They didn't know. So the VA called, and my father said this caused tremendous anxiety. They called it the Rip Van Winkle syndrome.
Oh.
They had been asleep for 3.5 years, that's what the VA called it, the Rip Van Winkle syndrome. So they'd go to an event and people would start talking about radar. They didn't know what radar was. My father actually saw the atomic bomb at Nagasaki. He was 35 miles from Nagasaki. Wow. He was very fortunate. They were on an island, the island of Almoto, and the wind was blowing the opposite way, but they didn't even know what they were looking at. So fortunately, the VA did a good job, and these men said, we need to catch up. We need to have lessons. What happened in 42? What happened in 43?
Yeah. Yeah. I
And
mean,
they-
and that was a time of new inventions and new, that was a lot of stuff was happening.
Right. And they said, otherwise they felt, well, they had been on another planet. They had been captives.
More or less.
He said, yeah. So he said they would like spend 3 months doing the year of 1942 and showing pictures, showing them. And this gave them the confidence. It took about a year, but it gave them the confidence that they were with people. He said there were so many holes in what people were talking about.
Yeah.
But of course, the other issue was anger. A lot of them became alcoholics. Sadly, the VA didn't know back then. They told them at night when you're having a dream, get up and drink.
Right.
Well, some of them drank too much.
That's all they knew.
Yeah.
And I think that's even till today in almost any branch of the service, there can be issues with that.
But he was fortunate. My father liked a good drink. Joe was a character. You would have loved him. He was a great dancer, great person. People didn't even know he was a POW. He was so positive and always smiling. But fortunately, he didn't drink during the week. He'd go out Saturday night dancing, have a scotch Saturday and Sunday. But a lot of them became full-blown alcoholics.
What did your dad do when he came home?
All right. When he first came home, they spent about a year in the hospital.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. When they brought them back, they weighed, most of them in the 90s. They had been on 700-800 calories with no protein. So they put them in hospitals as close as they could. So he ended up in Tacoma, Washington for about 3 to 4 months and had to build up, B12 shots, blood. They had tropical diseases. They had beriberi and lesions. So all of that. And, they didn't want to throw them right back into society because they weren't ready. And who knows, we're seeing today with COVID, if your immune system is weakened, like what happened in the hospitals and the nursing homes, you're going to go. So they knew that. Fortunately, the VA did a good job. So they spent, I think he was almost there 5 months, but he was interviewed by people from the press in New England and all that. So then he came back and he wasn't sure what he was going to do. I don't know what he had done prior to, enlisting. I think he just did delivering papers and odd jobs. And a friend got him a job in a supermarket, learning how to be a butcher. But that was a hard job.
Yeah.
And he used to, I guess chickens came in with their heads on.
It was a good job, though. It was a good job, though.
It was a good job. And that guy, Bruce Neff, he rose to be the general manager of Roach Brothers Markets in New England. And he stayed my father's friend forever. But about 3 years of that, someone got him into the printing industry, and he loved it. And this is old words. He was a linotypist, and he was a proofreader. And he made phone books, which we don't need anymore. But there was a big company called the Courier Citizen, a French company in Lowell, Massachusetts, and they made the phone books. They employed 5,000 men, mostly French. I'm French-Canadian. In fact, each summer he worked with Jack Kerouac, the famous beatnik, because Jack Kerouac's father was a printer.
Interesting.
Yeah, he was a printer.
My dad was in the printing business also.
Oh, yeah. That's an industry that died, but it was a good industry. He had to be in the typographical union they built up. So then eventually he got to come, after about 10 years with the Courier Citizen, he came to Haverhill, Mass. And worked for a local newspaper, the Haverhill Gazette. He did linotype. And for the youngsters that don't know, you had to set type in lead and it went in, and they wore lead aprons. Remember, Linda? Because it was a dangerous job.
Yeah.
Now we hit spell check.
Yeah.
What's interesting? I got to tell a 1-minute side story. I have a 9.5-year-old, very gifted grandson in California, and he had to do family history for a project last year. So I brought the original telegraph. I had it laminated, and I said, you're going to tell him about your great-grandfather, what it is to be a POW. I didn't want him to go in too much to the war, but basically that in a minute things can change and you're a captive, right? 1 minute you're kissing girls and
Right.
eating pineapples, and the next minute you're being bayoneted by the Japanese. So where do you hear this? This is how younger generations don't understand. So he goes to school, he shows the telegram, and he says, my great grandfather was captured on May 6, 1942, and the telegram came February 24th, 1943. Everyone in the class says, why didn't your great grandfather just text his mother? All these why didn't he text them?
Yeah.
So then he says, well, my Mimi told me there were no phones. Oh my God, there were no phones?
Right.
Then my Mimi told me there was no internet. And they're all going, oh my God. And then I made Lucas tell the class that my mama never heard till August 15, 1945, if her son was dead or alive. It's good for them to understand. I used to work at the Military Museum in Lago. I did a lot of tours for youngsters. Communications was night and day.
And kids are interested in it. They want to know about this stuff. You know what? I had the opportunity to go on the honor flight to Washington, D.C.
Oh, yeah.
And it was fabulous. As we walked around, different kids with schools were there. They would all come over and say, thank you for your service. You know, and especially I accompanied a woman, and she was in the Korean War.
Okay.
And especially when they saw women, young girls would come over and say, you know, thank you for your service. And in fact, she passed away 2 weeks ago, my friend. But
no, they're very interested. And I had a lot of tour groups at that beautiful museum in Lago. I missed that. Yeah. And it's fascinating. They said, wow, people had to suffer because I said, yeah, communication was not what it was. There was no cell phone that you could text your mother. Yeah. That was it. You had to wait. Yeah. And my grandmother had a great faith. She had the gold star in the window, you know, but she said every day I'm praying and he's going to come home. But they didn't know one way or the other.
No. So you had some challenges in your life the past years. And let's talk about that a little bit, because I think your dad taught you some lessons, huh?
I don't think I would have made it all the way out. August 30th, 2018, I went to a chiropractor. He ignored the fact that I had osteoporosis and an MRI, and he did a very aggressive manipulation. I ended up with severe compound fractures in L3, 4, and 5. I never walked from that day. From 3 o'clock on that day, I've never been able to stand up. And it required 2 surgeries, one in May of 2018, one in October. Both surgeries required 8 weeks each of complete laying flat. And then I had a compression fracture after that because the base of the spine was too weak. The sacrum gave way.
Right.
I couldn't handle it. So I'm going to be honest. I took an overdose of painkillers. I said, this is it. I can't survive. So that's how far down I went. And fortunately, my son in Massachusetts was a sheriff, and he picked up some weird things because I'm emailing them where my assets are and how I want my memorial service. And he goes, oh, my God. So God bless the sheriffs of Pinellas. They came and did a wellness check, and I went to Lago Med. I was intubated for 3 days. Whoa. Then, by the way, folks, you can hear when you're in a coma. So all of a sudden, I hear all these noises around me, and I hear a doctor say to my son, if she doesn't come out tomorrow, she has a DNR, we're going to pull the plug. I'm going, where am I? Now, I know an angel was around me. I heard noises, okay? My eyes, when I heard pull the plug, my eyes opened. They opened after 3 days.
You weren't ready to go.
No. I was at the gate. They wouldn't open the gate. I saw a lock on the gate. I saw the other side, and there was a lock. They said, no, this hellion's going back for a few more. Misbehaving ain't coming over yet. She's got some lessons. So I had a long haul. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you. I was in rehabs. I had to have caregivers, PT, and at the same time, my lovely partner, John, got pneumonia and passed away. 3 weeks after I got out of the rehab, I lost the man of my life. Yeah. So there was some dark nights, and I kept remembering Joe. And here's what I did. I said, this is why I want to live. I have great friends. Everybody prayed for me. I love my house in Florida. I love dancing. I love going to JD's and see lovely Linda Burham's Tommy. I love life. I love life. I
You.
do. I do. You know, the musicians say to me, "You're a blessing," because we remember what you were like before, and you come down here and you dance on a walker. And
Right.
I'm on videos. I'm on TikTok because they never see an old lady on a pink walker dancing. So the lesson was dig deep, believe you could make it. And that was a big, I make that sound easy. But
Yeah.
you know, Linda, you careful.
That's not easy.
No, it took about 6 months of digging deep, and I had to embrace who I was. There's the key word. Okay, I got to embrace that I'm going to have some physical limits.
Right.
The doctors were shocked. They said she'll never come back. 2 days later, I was talking to the nurses, telling stories, and my son goes, "Oh my God, she's back." She's back full time. But I had to embrace who I was, figure out where I needed help. A lovely minister, I had ministers praying with me. I've been in Unity. I had 4 different ministers praying with me. And a Unity minister said to me, "Pat, Dave Tompkins, you have helped lots of people. Now it's let people help you." That's a two-way street. And he said, when they help you and they see that face light up, are you dancing on a walker? He said, you've brought joy to their life. And that was the transition. But many a day I prayed to my father. I said, "Joe, give me the strength. Give me the strength." And another lesson I learned from Joe, because I had to forgive this chiropractor. I did take him through the court system. They just censured him. They didn't take his license away. I was hoping like for a year of license so that he could calm down and, you know, not be so aggressive. But I took the best road, and I have to stay with the decision. Well, this is a great story. In 1994, it's Thanksgiving, and we're cooking dinner, and I say to my husband, "Look at this. Joe Vaillancourt is driving up in a Toyota Camry." I'm going, "No." My husband said, "Yeah, it's a Toyota." Most Japanese POWs did not buy Toyota Camrys.
No.
In fact, the last guy that survived out of my father's group, McAvoy, got drunk at 89 years old, got in a Toyota on a lake, put it in neutral, and shoved it in the lake. He shoved it in the lake at 89 years old because he still hated Japanese.
God bless him.
Oh my God, the police came and the son is going, he had a post-traumatic moment. We'll pay for it. But Joe, he did. He shoved a whole brand new SUV in a lake. And, you know, some of them would see a Toyota, they'd break the windows.
Yeah.
You know, and sad.
But not your dad.
No, you know what he said? "I will remember this to the day," and I forgave this chiropractor. Obviously, he didn't want to do what he did to me. It was misjudgment. Right. He said, the Japanese were raised from a young age in elementary school with the Bushido warrior code. They were brainwashed. It was a horrible code. The samurais was a religion. It was supposed to be a way to stay fit and strong. The emperor made it into a war tool. That's what he did. He said they were brutal to their own men. He said one day he saw a private that didn't bow down enough at the rising sun flag, and they beat him unconscious and left him in the yard. When you died in Japan, 1 penny postcard. You were called penny soldiers, and that's what went home to you. So you know what he said to me, Pat? They were raised as brutal warriors. They didn't know any better. He said they were good people. When the surrender came, you know, many of them after the bomb said, "We sorry." You know, they were brutalized, and you know, the mentality was they were brainwashed.
Yeah.
So here was his best sentence: do you want to spend your whole life in hate, using up that energy, or do you want to have a good time? And he said, "I love the Toyota Camry." Now here's the ending. He got the car for $5,000 off because he worked for the Lawrence Eagle Tribune doing ads. They made an ad. The owner couldn't believe this. Joe says, "I'm buying a Toyota Camry and I'm a Japanese POW." He said, I'm running a half-page ad that it's such a great car. A POW was buying it. It was the most popular ad. And that week, Commonwealth Motors sold more Toyota Camrys than they ever did.
Oh my goodness.
So
He saved $5,000. Not bad.
the guy couldn't believe it. I knew him. I used to date him. I should have married him. No, Charlie Daha. He says to me, your dad's buying a Toyota Camry? I'm going to run an ad. And they had a picture of my father's prisoner of war papers, his picture, and him with the new car. Unbelievable. So you know what? When you let go, gratitude happens, the doors open.
And years ago, I kept praying for things to be strong about. I kept praying for strength, and I kept getting things to be strong about. Now I pray for clarity.
Good.
I think that's really important.
Yeah, don't play for too much strength, because Cosmic 2, my
Exactly.
minister in Massachusetts used to say, be careful what you ask for. Cosmic 2x4 come down.
Yeah.
But I've embraced who I am. A lot of people tell me I'm a good lesson. They see me. They tell me they're going to tell their mother to get off her butt, go dancing, go to the gym and work out.
Yeah.
I meet a lot of interesting people that help me.
Yeah.
And I've learned how, and I have the other thing, it softened my heart. There are a lot of limits when you're handicapped. Simply just getting to the door of Dollar Tree, and it only opens one way.
Right.
And I have to go in.
And you don't realize it until you're in it.
You don't realize it. You don't realize it. But you know what I do when I get out of the car? I say a prayer and I say, I hope somebody will show up at the door to open it. And they do. In fact, I'll tell you a funny story. I was at Dollar Tree in Largo the other day, and this man held the door for me, and he says, you're a golden girl, but you're looking good, Mama. I said, you wait here. You get a tip from me when I go. So not only do I get the door open, I have some fun.
Exactly.
And when people, and I'm a Reiki master of 28 years, when people feel that vibration of forgiveness, blessings, gratitude, the right people come.
Exactly. Well, it was fabulous talking to you today, my friend. I hope to see you when you're back in town.
I know.
And, where can our listeners find you?
Say that again.
Where can our listeners find you?
They can Google me, Patricia Vaillancourt. My talks are on YouTube, and the one that's the most poignant it's called The Naked Truth, the story of a Japanese POW. The Naked Truth, the story of... Linda, it was a good day. We met at Unity Network, I don't know how many years ago, 17 or 18. And our paths have crossed in so many different ways. And I'm blessed to have you. God bless you, honey.
Have a delicious day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.